After much ado and many difficulties, we finally know all of the teams that will be attending the 6th Invitational 2022. Over the course of the last few days, we saw the North American and the Latin American closed qualifiers, and the winner of each of them was sort of the expected winner, I'd say, the heavy favorite going into it. And so let's talk about it. First, over the course of Saturday and Sunday, we saw the North American one, so we'll start there. TSM, Mirage, Parabellum, and One Shot were the teams that partook in this. And of course, 3 of these are tier 1 teams, and then One Shot is probably one of the top T2 teams at the moment. TSM, once again, the favorite going into the thing. They've had some struggles throughout the year, and especially recently, just missing out on the Sweden major, and therefore just missing out on SI by qualifying via points. And, well, Mirage missed out pretty narrowly as well. Mirage actually being the team that stopped TSM from going to Sweden by defeating them in the last playday. Parabellum recently qualified for the NAL, so they're on a little bit of a hot streak. And there was also this trend that I think it was Jesse Chick brought up, that the North American qualifier team was the same team back-to-back in pairs. So the first 2 qualifiers, it was Era Eternity, and then the second 2, or the third and fourth, I suppose, was Space Station, and then last year is Parabellum. So to continue the trend, it should have been Parabellum, but as you may know, that is not the case. They were the runner-up, but it was not especially close. All right, let's just take a look at the bracket and see what happened. This was a double elimination bracket, so, once you lose once in the upper bracket, you get a second chance in the lower bracket, and so this resulted in us seeing a total of 6 matches. All of them were best of 3s, except for the grand final, which was best of 5, no map advantage. So, as you can see, TSM took it 3-0 cleanly. Right, so we'll start with TSM Parabellum. Most of this match was not seen on stream. We only saw like the first 2 or 3 rounds, and then we didn't get to see the rest. And the Mirage one-shot game, we didn't see any of this on stream, but everything else, I believe, we got to see in full. Right, so TSM versus Parabellum, clean 2-0. TSM mopped the floor with them on Bank, and then a good 7-4 on Oregon. Didn't even need to see Chalet. So TSM looked to be in form, but again, not that we actually got to see it, just the score. On Bank, since it's re-entered the competitive map pool, I think TSM have only dropped 3 rounds on it in three times played. They had this 7-0 against Parabellum, and they had another 7-2, as you'll see in a little bit. And I think they got a 7-1 against Beast Coast, so 21-3 on rounds on Bank so far. So they're an absolute menace. But again, we haven't seen them against any top tier teams, I guess, on the map yet. So we'll have to see if we see any of that at the Invitational. Okay, next match, Mirage versus One Shot. This was a little bit of an upset, considering One Shot had to be the lowest seeded, or the weakest seeming team going into it. They were the only non-T1 team, and they had to get in through the second open qualifier. They lost in the first open qualifier to Parabellum. So what happened here? 7-3 for Mirage on Coastline, so it seemed like it was just going to be a clean Mirage victory, but then a 7-2 answer back and a 7-3. So One Shot took it in the end, and barely handily, despite a pretty bad loss on Coastline. Maybe they just needed to wake up, or maybe Coastline's just not their map. Once they got onto these more strategic maps, they seem to take Mirage down pretty handily. All right, so we'll look at the upper bracket final next. TSM versus One Shot. So this is the only map, as you can see, that TSM actually lost in this qualifier, is against One Shot, which, again, the weakest seeming team going into the thing. And depending on what you thought, maybe you thought Parabellum was the strongest, maybe you thought Mirage was the weakest. I don't know. And, well, it turns out Mirage were the weakest in terms of performance at this event, since they went out first. So TSM versus One Shot. One Shot LFO, I should say. One Shot is not actually an org. These guys are looking for an org, and they're probably one of the most deserving teams in NA that, of course, doesn't have an org. So, right. 7-5 for One Shot on the first map, so, maybe One Shot is going to go to the grand final. It wasn't the case in the end, but they kept it pretty close with 2 7-4s after this. Chalet, I think this was a bit of a comeback, and they went against the grain a little bit. You could see that One Shot won 5 defenses, and generally Chalet is more of an attacker-sided map. I don't remember what the scoreline was, but I think they chained together several in a row. I want to say it was like 5-4 in favor of TSM or something, and then One Shot won 3 in a row. It was something. They won quite a few defenses to win the game in overtime, and of course, if they had won any fewer, they would have gone to, did I say without overtime? I don't know what I just said. And if they'd won any fewer, they would have either lost or gone to overtime. So good on them there, and then they kept it close, even on TSM's legendary Cafe, and then on Villa as well. But as you see here, TSM didn't drop another map after this. Right, so Parabellum versus Mirage, a clean 2-0 for Parabellum. 7-4 and 7-5, so fairly close, but no overtime even. And Parabellum got a little bit of redemption on Bank after they got 7-0'd on it. So I guess TSM is just a step above the competition. And after getting embarrassed by TSM, Parabellum didn't quite embarrass Mirage, but they knocked them out of the tournament. So tough for them. Then we see One Shot versus Parabellum. This is maybe not a rivalry per se, but it sort of is. These are two of the best teams coming from T2. And again, Parabellum now a T1 team. And One Shot being either the second best CL team from the last season or like the third or fourth. They were definitely one of the best just behind Parabellum. And this was they played some other match. They definitely, I believe, played in the Open Qualifier. I think this was the grand final game, if I remember right. And they've played, of course, in CL, but this was maybe the lower bracket final. I don't know. It was something in toward the end of the CL playoff bracket. So what do we have here? We have a 7-5, a 7-5, and a 7-1. So they kept it close, 7-5 for each team in the first two maps, and then go to Chalet and PB mop the floor with them. So I think Chalet is just supposed to be one of PB's best maps. And well, they showed it here, and you might have thought it would have been closer given that One Shot beat TSM on Chalet, but I don't know, just maybe it was a fluke, maybe One Shot ran out of gas over the course of the weekend, whatever it was. But speaking of gas, these two games were played on Sunday, whereas these 4 games were played on Saturday. So Parabellum now needed to go into the grand final and win 3 maps after having played 3 maps to win the whole thing, but 3-0 for TSM, and very cleanly as well, fairly cleanly. We see overtime, which is this the first overtime? Did I miss one? Oh no, I guess that's the only overtime that we saw, and it was in the very last one. I feel like we haven't been seeing very much overtime lately, and maybe that's just the nature of the closed qualifiers. There's just enough of a disparity between some of the teams that this is the case, right? Anyways, finally for the very last map we saw overtime, and you'll see a little bit of a trend here. Parabellum got 2 rounds on the first map, they got 4 rounds on the second map, and then finally they got 6 rounds, but TSM was still winning all of them. So right, TSM looked to be sort of back in form. Of course, these aren't teams that are of the level of most of the competition they'll face at the 6 Invitational, but they definitely look a lot better than they did in stage 3 of the NAL, where they had some struggles. They didn't look terrible at all times. And one more thing I suppose I should mention, my understanding is that Merc is now the IGL. Just not too long ago, Chala became the IGL, so it was achieved, and then they handed off to Chala, and then I think Merc said for this event, right before this event, they switched over to him being the IGL. These were the first matches, and so, I mean, interesting. I don't think his stats suffered that much, but maybe a little bit. He's definitely a hot and cold player in the past, some really good performances and some poor ones, but I think Achieve and Bolo especially popped off in this. Right, so I think that was the last thing I wanted to mention about this, and right, we'll move on to the LATAM qualifier next. Much like in the North American qualifier, the seeming favorite for the Latin American qualifier was the one that took it in the end, MIBR. They've struggled throughout the year after SI. They got 3rd at the last SI, which is very impressive, but then they did not do well enough in their regional league to attend either of the other majors, the Mexico major and the Sweden major. So they fell off a little bit, but maybe this will be their redemption. Maybe they'll do quite well at this SI, just like they did the last one. And then we have Black Dragons coming in. Let me just show the rosters. This is MIBR, of course. And Black Dragons is the other team coming in from the actual LATAM main league from the Brasileiro. They did qualify through the Brazil qualifier, though. They didn't get in through standings. It was MIBR and Malvinas. Right, so we have two mainly Brazilian teams, technically 3, and then 2 South American teams, 2 Mexican teams. Let's actually look at this, though. So Malvinas is South American team, 4 Argentinians, and 1 Paraguayan, 1 person from Paraguay, whatever their national moniker thingy is. And then when we have Phoenix, so this is an all-Mexican team. Black Dragons, again, all from Brazil as well as MIBR. And then Furious, we see, once again, 4 Argentinians as well as a Chilean. And then Acave, this was the roster that was previously on Atheris. They have 3 Brazilian players and 2 Mexican players, but they qualified through the Mexican qualifier, so I'm not sure. I guess maybe the requirements to play in the Mexican qualifier, Mexican league and whatever, is only 2 out of 5 of your roster to be from Mexico. I'm not sure of the exact logistics. The subregions within LATAM are like a little bit weird. compared to like NA where it's pretty simple. Just almost every player's from the US, right? So, okay, what happened? Oh, no, let me mention one other thing. The whole controversy thing, they were playing on LAN originally in Brazil, and then they got like a few rounds into the thing, and then they had to call it all off. And so they're playing in Sweden here. This was supposed to be what, the second qualifier overall, and it ended up being the last one. And some roster changes came into effect. So we'll start with Akave here. They actually found a team. So this used to be a Theorist just like a week ago or something, and then one of their players left, and then the next day another player left, and then the next day like all three of their players left. So it was unclear what was going to happen. It was unclear for the whole thing, like which of these teams, how many of these teams were actually going to partake in the qualifier, but it ended up being all 6 of them in some form or another. Right, so these guys all got back together, and they were picked up by Akave Esports, a Mexican esports organization. So good on them to find an org so quickly, and good on the org for picking them up so quickly. They seem like a pretty good team. Of course, they didn't win the qualifier or anything, but they put up a fight. And then Phoenix, Luxor, and Toski also just joined this roster like less than a week ago, I think. So they're playing with 2 new players basically, and I don't recall the name of the 2 players that were on the roster before, but Luxor and Toski are new. And okay, so anything else I need to talk about here? Maybe not. Maybe if I didn't mention it, right? 3 teams coming in from the global standings, and 1 from each of the sub-region qualifiers: Brazil, LATAM, and Mexico. And I guess one last thing, MIBR and I think, was it Phoenix were the 2 higher of the global standings teams, so they got automatically seeded into the bracket, whereas these other 4 teams, Furious, Black Dragons, Malvinas, and Akave, I hope I'm saying that right, I'm assuming I am, they had to play through a little round robin thing to determine which 2 teams would go forward into the bracket. And this bracket is a little bit different in that it is only single elimination as opposed to the other qualifiers, I think, all did double elimination. I don't remember if APAC did. The other, Europe and NA definitely did double elimination. Okay, so they played this little round robin thing, just 3 best of ones, and they came all the way out to Sweden, and Malvinas and Furious, they played 3 best of ones, and then that's it. And then I guess the 3 other teams also only got to play a few best of 3, 5s, whatever. And then they went home, barring MIBR, who are staying in Sweden for the 6th Invitational, right? So Black Dragons end up in the top seed, and this is all very close with 6 points, 5 points, 4 points, 3 points. They are doing the point distribution where you get only 2 points for winning in overtime, and if you lose in overtime, you get 1 point, and winning in regulation gets you 3 points, losing in regulation 0 points. So, so this is a win in regulation, win in overtime, loss in overtime, and loss in regulation. And also the round count's quite close. So the 2nd and 4th team actually 0 round differential, and then the top team got +3 and the 3rd team got -3. So very tight competition for a lot of this. And well, I mean, maybe it's just the nature of best of ones, or maybe it's the nature of the format. I think the very last game didn't really matter for who's got in. It only mattered for seeding. So let's just look how things progressed. Akave took down a Malvinas 8-6, so we get to see a little bit of overtime. But then I don't think we definitely don't see any more overtime in the round robin. Maybe we'll see some down here in a second. I don't recall. Right, and then Akave took down Black Dragons, and at this point, I think they were pretty well secured. Maybe not technically, but I think I guess I could have run the numbers, but I think at this point, having 5 points and no losses, it made it pretty likely that they were definitely going to go through in either the 1st or 2nd seed position. The seeding did matter here. In the end, it didn't really matter, but it does matter a little bit going forward. Right, and then Black Dragons took down Furious. Malvinas took down Furious as well. So at this point, everyone has a win except for Furious, and as you see, they do get a win by the end, but it didn't really matter too much. Black Dragons take down Malvinas, and Furious takes down Akave. Right, so roll back the table a little bit here. So Furious had 0 points, and Akave had 5 points going into this last game, and so it didn't really matter. Furious couldn't even make it to 3rd place, but not that 3rd place really matters. And Akave could have gotten the 1st seed, which maybe it would have made a difference. Maybe they could have made it to the grand final, possibly, if they'd gotten the 1st seed rather than the 2nd seed. But once again, I'll show it in just a second. Didn't really matter. Right, so these are the results, and it's just some best of ones, so it's really hard to say what the deal was here. Best of ones are quite unfortunate, and so luckily for us, we won't be seeing any at the 6th Invitational. Okay, so at this point, Black Dragons gets the 1st seed from the round robin, which lets them play the 2nd seed from the qualifier, or from the global standings qualification, and then Akave has to play the 1st seed. So MIBR against Akave, just as good as Akave might have looked in the qualifier, even though they lost this game to Furious. Maybe they just didn't even care because they were already qualified, but I would think you would want the better seed, but maybe they were just hard saving strats because they had to turn around and just the next day just play against whoever. So they got 7-3, 7-1. So unfortunate, but MIBR is looking pretty good at the moment. And so is Black Dragons. They took down Phoenix 7-3 and 7-2, so a 2-0. And so just almost as good. They just dropped one more round than MIBR did. So in the grand finals, we see the two teams coming from the Brasileiro, two full Brazilian rosters, going head to head, and MIBR wins in the end. But we do see a full best of 5. And so I guess, yeah, we only saw the one overtime game in this qualifier as well. And this was the first game that we saw, as opposed to the last game in the North American qualifier. So pretty tight affair. They went pretty close in all of the maps except for the very last one. So a 7-5 clubhouse for Black Dragons. So Black Dragons probably the underdog, I think, going into this match by pretty much every standard, just historical success and then also seeding and whatnot within this qualifier itself. And they did take the first map. And then the next two go to MIBR, but they even it up, Black Dragons that is, by winning Villa. But then, I don't know, they ran out of steam, or MIBR's clubhouse, or rather Cafe, it's just much better than Black Dragons. Whatever it was, MIBR dismantled Black Dragons 7-1. And notice that 5 of these are on attack, so they were really taking them to task there. And okay, so that is the 19th and 20th team. We'll see TSM and MIBR. And these are two of the teams that did the best at the last SI. MIBR got 3rd place, and TSM got 4th place. So I think definitely forces to be reckoned with. And they both absolutely had their international struggles after SI, of course, with MIBR making no international appearances and TSM only going to one of the 2 majors where they went out last place in their group. Do keep in mind that was not with their full 5-man roster, but still. And I think that's pretty much all I need to talk about here. I think there's quite a lot to talk about in regards to SI and other things that have happened, so I might have several videos coming out in the next few days back to back. I guess I'll mention this, just as good a place as any. Somebody in my previous video in the comment section, what was dude's name, Laser or something, he said that it seems semi-leaked, confirmed or whatever, that XSET will be that 10th team for the NAL going into next year, based on the fact that they are automatically qualified for the SCS Pro-Am, and on the Liquipedia page it says direct invite via NAL or whatever it says on there. And maybe that's just an oversight, and maybe that's bait, and maybe that's just a filler thing for whoever it is, whatever the case. I mean, it seems the most likely that they just didn't care or accidentally leaked it or whatever it was. But take that for what it's worth, take that for what you will. And okay, I guess that's gonna do it. If there's anything you want me to talk about in the coming days, let me know. Maybe I will. Somebody sort of requested that, or no, they didn't request it. They suggested that I can maybe talk about the APAC relegations, but having so much other stuff to talk about, I don't think I'm going to cover it because I'm not terribly knowledgeable on APAC, as I've said in the past. And if I didn't have other things to talk about, I probably would. But given that SI is coming up and there's much to talk about, I probably won't be talking about that. And right, so long outro ramble aside, with all of that being said, catch you in the next video.